The last thing my stepmother said before I stopped speaking to her at dinner was that we should think of family finances as a shared resource pool. She said it the way people say things they've been rehearsing. Too smooth, too casual, eyes on her fork instead of my face. My father went quiet beside her. He always went quiet when she floated ideas like that, as if silence were a form of agreement and agreement were a form of love. I set down my glass. I didn't raise my voice. I looked at her and said, if I ever hear my savings described as a family resource again, this will be the last dinner I attend, not as a threat, as a statement of fact. She laughed it off, called me intense. My father cleared his throat and changed the subject to the weather. That was 6 weeks before everything came apart. Before I get to what happened next, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this gets. I am 31 years old. I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm in Atlanta, which means I spend my days finding money people are trying to hide. Payroll fraud, embezzlement, insurance schemes, the kind of financial crimes that look like ordinary paperwork until someone looks at the paperwork closely enough. I'm good at it because I am methodical, and I am methodical because I had to be. My mother passed away when I was 11. My father remarried 3 years later. My stepmother moved into our house the summer before 8th grade, and she came with opinions about everything. How I loaded the dishwasher, which college major had real earning potential, how much my hobbies cost the household. She was never cruel in the obvious ways. She didn't scream or slam doors or make scenes at school functions. She was the kind of difficult that hides in spreadsheets. I know that now because I found the spreadsheet. It was the Thanksgiving before last. She meant to send a Google Sheets link to my aunt. She sent it to me instead. The file name was Household Contributions and Returns, and it was organized with the same precision she brought to everything she wanted to keep hidden. There were columns for my father, my aunt, a cousin who had borrowed money once in 2019, and apparently never let her forget it. And then there was my column. She had been tracking me since I was 14. Birthday gift 2008. Christmas 2009, a Bodywork sweater. High school graduation, a $75 Barnes & Noble card. College graduation, $100 cash. Emergency gas money, 2017. Subtotal, 47. But it was the column next to the dollar amounts that I had to read twice. The header said expected return. Her note in my row read, TBD, contingent on asset distribution and property co-ownership. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time after that. Outside, I could hear her laughing about something with my aunt in the kitchen. That particular laugh she used when she wanted someone to feel included just enough to stay in the room. She had tracked 8 years of birthday presents and graduation envelopes, and 1 tank of gas. And she had filed it under investments she planned to collect on someday. She didn't think of herself as greedy. She thought she was keeping accounts. And people who keep accounts always believe, eventually, that someone owes them. I closed the file. I didn't bring it up. Not then. I kept that information the way I keep everything useful, filed, dated, and ready. 3 days after the dinner, where she used the phrase shared resource pool, I was at my desk on a Sunday morning doing what I do every Sunday morning, running through my credit report. I have alerts set up on all 3 bureaus. The one that came in had arrived at 11:47 on a Friday night while I was asleep. A hard inquiry. From a home equity lender I'd never heard of. The name a generic stack of words designed to sound like trust and mean nothing. Timestamp 2 days after dinner. I didn't panic. Panic is expensive. I poured more coffee and opened my laptop. My father and stepmother had paid off their house 4 years ago. A home equity line of credit against a debt-free property is one of the cleaner ways to pull significant cash without triggering the kind of flags a personal loan would. With a strong co-applicant, the rates would be better, the cap higher. My credit score was 791. My stepmother's, I happened to know from a joint tax form I'd helped my father file 2 years back, was 6 more. She hadn't been looking into refinancing options. She had been shopping for a co-signer. I called my father. He answered on the 3rd ring, the Golf Channel audible in the background. There's a hard pull on my credit from a home equity company, I said. No greeting. Do you know anything about it? A pause. 1 beat too long. Oh, that's probably. Your stepmother was looking into some things. You know how she gets about interest rates. She may have accidentally filled in your information when she was browsing. His voice had that particular flatness it gets when he's repeating something he was told to say. You don't accidentally type someone else's social security number, I said. Another pause. Longer. I'm sure it's nothing, he said. She'll get it cleaned up. I said okay. I hung up. I already knew she wouldn't clean it up because she hadn't made a mistake. I went to the lender's site. It was aggressive in the way of things designed to get you to commit before you've thought it through. Countdown banners, green approval badges, pre-qualification offers before you'd finished a single field. I entered my email address. The system recognized it. She had used my actual address. That was arrogance or calculation, and with my stepmother, those two things were often the same. She assumed I wouldn't check, or she planned to delete the notification emails before I saw them, except she couldn't intercept my texts. She could forge a signature. She could not reroute a verification code. I clicked Forgot Password. My phone buzzed 4 seconds later. I reset the credentials and the dashboard opened. The numbers were larger than I expected. Home equity line of credit, 95,000 status, approved pending final co-borrower signature. The collateral listed was my father's house. I navigated to the document package and opened the signature files. I wasn't looking at the interest rate, though it was, as expected, the kind of rate that qualifies as predatory under federal guidelines. I was looking for the audit trail. Every digital signing platform generates one. It logs every interaction. When the document was opened, when each field was clicked, when the signature was submitted, and the IP address from which each action was performed. It's called a Certificate of Completion, and most people who shouldn't be signing documents in other people's names don't know it exists. The co-borrower signature filed under my name had been submitted on a Tuesday at 10:22 in the morning. On that Tuesday, I was in Chicago. I had flown out the day before for a 3-day forensic accounting conference at a hotel on Michigan Avenue. My hotel confirmation, my conference badge scan, a transaction receipt from the hotel cafe at 8:47 that same morning, all of it documented and timestamped. I don't travel without documentation. Same instinct that has me reviewing my credit report every Sunday. I looked at the IP address attached to the signature. I recognized the format immediately. Same internet provider my father had used for 15 years, static residential IP. I'd helped him set up port forwarding on that router once, years ago, after he bought a smart thermostat he didn't know how to configure. It was their home address. She had sat in my father's house on a Tuesday morning and signed my name on a federal co-borrower agreement while I was 400 miles away buying hotel coffee. I downloaded everything: the application, the certificate of completion, the IP logs, the approval letter. I pulled it all into a folder and named it documentation. Then I changed the account password and locked her out. She would think it was a system error. She would try again later and get the same result and assume the platform was glitching. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the folder icon for a moment. This wasn't a family dispute. Forging a co-borrower's signature on a federal lending document is wire fraud. Using another person's identity and credit history to obtain financing is aggravated identity theft, a federal charge that carries a mandatory consecutive sentence. These are not things you settle at Christmas dinner with an awkward apology and a changed subject. These are things with case numbers. I knew exactly what I had. The question was how to use it. She called the following Wednesday afternoon. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. Sweetheart. Her voice was warm in the way of something left in the sun too long, heat without light. I'm so glad I caught you. Your father and I have some exciting news. I said nothing. I waited. We found it, she said, and I could hear the real thing under the performance now that I knew what I was listening for. A cabin up in the Smokies, outside Gatlinburg, right on a creek, 2 bedrooms, sellers are motivated. We can close before the end of the month if we get everything sorted quickly. That sounds lovely, I said. It really is. The only thing, and here her voice shifted into the register she used when she wanted something and was dressing it as a favor to me. There's a small paperwork issue. The lender flagged a discrepancy on the co-borrower section. Something about a verification step they need cleared. It's routine, completely routine. They just need you to come in and sign a release document. It takes your name off the application going forward. Honestly, it's just housekeeping on their end. You'd be in and out in 15 minutes. I understood the shape of it immediately. There was no discrepancy. There was no release. What she was describing was the final co-borrower signature on the HELOC agreement, the one that would bind me legally as a borrower on a $95,000 line of credit secured against my father's house, completing the fraudulent application she had filed in my name. If I signed what she was calling a release, I wasn't releasing anything. I was accepting liability on a 6-figure debt I had never agreed to take on. She was using the credit inquiry she had generated as the bait. She was telling me she was fixing a problem she had created, while using my presence at the bank to complete the crime. When is the appointment? I asked. Friday at 2. The branch downtown just off Peachtree. You really would be doing us such a huge favor. Your father is so stressed about this falling through. You know how he gets when something he's excited about doesn't work out. I thought about my father on the other end of that phone call 6 days ago, telling me he was sure it was nothing. I'll be there, I said. She exhaled, a sound she probably didn't realize she was making. Wonderful. You're such a good kid, you know that? We'll see you Friday. She hung up thinking she had everything she needed to close on a creekside cabin before Thanksgiving. She didn't know I had filed an FTC identity theft report that morning, case number included. I sat in my car for a few minutes after hanging up, not because I was upset, but because I needed to think without distraction, and I always think more clearly in enclosed spaces. I could have sent the documentation to the lender's fraud department right then. Filed a police report, let the process work through channels. Never set foot in that branch office. That would have been the administrative choice. But I had spent 17 years watching my stepmother reframe reality with patient, systematic revision. She would have called it a miscommunication. She would have sat across from my father, and with that particular talent of hers for constructing alternative narratives, turned the entire thing into a story about how I had overreacted, how I had misunderstood, how my work made me see fraud everywhere. And my father would have let her, because letting her was the habit of 30 years, and habits are harder to break than promises. I needed her to commit on the record, in front of a federal lending officer, on paperwork that would be filed with the government and dated and timestamped in a system that does not revise for anyone's narrative. I needed the ink to dry before I said a word. Friday morning, I printed everything in the folder. 31 pages, organized in order. FTC report, certificate of completion with the IP address highlighted, the address registration record, my Chicago hotel confirmation, the conference badge scan, the cafe receipt time-stamped 8:47 a.m. I put it all in a manila envelope. I wore the blazer I wear when I testify in deposition. The branch office smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled air, and something underneath both of those things. The particular smell of large numbers of people making large financial decisions in a room with no windows. There was a water cooler that gurgled every few minutes. A rubber plant in the corner that needed more light than it was getting. My stepmother was already there when I arrived. She had dressed for the occasion, a silk blouse in a color that looked expensive under fluorescent lighting, earrings I hadn't seen before. She was chatting with the loan officer, an older man with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the practiced calm of someone who processes other people's most significant financial moments every day and has learned not to feel too much about any of them. She turned when I walked in. For half a second, before the smile appeared, something moved across her face that wasn't quite an expression, just a flicker of something she caught and covered quickly. "You made it," she said. "You look great." My father was already seated at the table. He was wearing a dress shirt he'd ironed wrong, a crease running at the wrong angle across the chest. He was looking at the rubber plant in the corner, with the fixed attention of someone working very hard not to look at anything else in the room. He knew. He had to know. He had signed his name on the initial application paperwork. He was sitting in that chair in that ironed wrong dress shirt because he had made his choice already, and the choice he had made was the one he always made, the one that required the least from him. The loan officer introduced himself, opened the document package, and walked through the procedural overview, routine. Standard. He turned to my stepmother first. Section 4, Sources of Funds. You're certifying that the draw amounts from this line of credit will not be applied toward the purchase price of a real property currently under contract. Is that accurate? She glanced at the paper. She glanced at me. She looked at the loan officer. That's correct, she said. The Gatlinburg cabin had been under contract for 11 days. I had pulled the purchase agreement from the county clerk's online filing system the previous evening. The HELOC funds were the intended payment. She had just stated clearly and on the record that they were not. My father picked up the pen when it was passed to him. His hand was shaking, not dramatically, just enough that I could see it from across the table. He looked at my stepmother. She did not look back at him. He signed. The loan officer slid the co-borrower packet across the table toward me. I did not reach for the pen. I reached into my bag. The manila envelope landed on the mahogany with a sound that was quieter than I expected, just a soft, flat thud. But in that room with its water cooler gurgles and its fluorescent hum, it landed like a period at the end of a very long sentence. "I won't be signing today," I said. I kept my voice clear and even. I was aware of the security camera mounted in the upper corner of the room. The co-borrower signature on your application is not mine. I was not present when the documents were signed. I did not authorize this application, and I have never had any communication with this lending institution prior to accessing the account portal last Sunday. My stepmother laughed. A short, bright sound, the kind that's meant to suggest the person laughing has the upper hand. "What are you talking about? This is completely..." I slid the envelope to the loan officer. "This is an FTC identity theft report filed Wednesday morning. Behind it is your platform's own certificate of completion for the co-borrower signature. The audit trail shows the signature was submitted from a residential IP address registered to the primary borrowers on this application. Their home address, which I've printed separately. The timestamp on the signature is a Tuesday at 10:22 a.m. My hotel confirmation, conference registration record, and a time-stamped cafe receipt from that morning place me in Chicago at the time the signature was executed." He opened the envelope. He read slowly. The loan officer's face, which had been professionally neutral for the entire appointment, went through several careful adjustments as he turned the pages. My stepmother was speaking. I could hear the pitch of her voice climbing. Words like misunderstanding, and she knew about this, and this is not what it looks like. My father was looking at the rubber plant. Additionally, I said over her voice, because I had prepared this and I was going to finish it. The declaration made a few minutes ago, that the HELOC funds would not be applied toward a property purchase currently under contract, is directly contradicted by this. I set down the last page, the Gatlinburg purchase agreement I had pulled from the county filing system. The property went under contract 11 days ago. The sellers are the same ones mentioned in the purchase agreement. The closing date aligns with this HELOC approval timeline. The room went quiet in a particular way, not the absence of sound, but the absence of pretense. The loan officer set the papers down. He took off his reading glasses. He looked at my stepmother, then at me, then at nothing specific, the way people look when they are rapidly reassessing something they thought they understood. I need to pause this appointment, he said. I have to contact our compliance department before anything moves forward. If this line of credit funds using proceeds from a fraudulently obtained co-borrower signature, I said, the lending institution assumes exposure under federal co-conspirator statutes. I'd recommend your compliance team loop in legal counsel before close of business today. He stood, picked up his phone, and left the room. My stepmother stood up. She came around the table toward the envelope, which was still sitting open in front of where the loan officer had been. I put my hand on it first. Don't, I said. She stopped. We were close enough that I could smell her perfume. The same one she'd worn to every holiday dinner, every graduation, every birthday where she'd handed me a gift card and mentally logged it under expected return. Her face had dropped the performance entirely now. What was underneath it was not guilt. It was the very specific fury of someone who had planned something carefully, over a long period of time, and watched it dissolve in 15 minutes. You have no idea what you've just done, she said very quietly. I know exactly what I've done, I said, and I know exactly what you did. Security arrived. A young man in a polo shirt who asked everyone to remain calm and wait for the branch manager. My stepmother turned to my father. He was still in his chair. He had not moved during any of it. Say something, she said. My father looked at the rubber plant. He had been looking at it since before she signed the declaration. He had looked at it through every page of the paperwork, through the scratch of his own pen on documents he knew were fraudulent. He had chosen that rubber plant over and over again, every time she made a comment at dinner and he changed the subject. Every time she floated an idea about family money and he went quiet instead of speaking. He had chosen it for 17 years. He said nothing. The branch manager arrived, reviewed the documents the loan officer had laid out, and made a call. The HELOC application was frozen pending a fraud investigation. The Gatlinburg purchase contract would collapse when the funds didn't clear by the closing deadline. Everything my stepmother had spent months constructing, the credit pull, the forged signature, the carefully timed cabin deal, dissolved in the time it took a compliance officer to read a DocuSign audit trail and match an IP address to a home. I left before the branch manager finished her call. I walked to the elevator, pressed the lobby button, and stood in the quiet of the descending car. My phone lit up with my father's name before I reached my car in the parking structure. I looked at it. I thought about the spreadsheet, about 847s in birthday gifts filed under expected return, about a pen moving across fraudulent paperwork with a shaking hand and the hand signing it anyway. I declined the call. Then I blocked the number. Then I blocked her number. Then I sat in the parked car in the concrete quiet for another minute, because some silences you earn, and this one had been a long time coming. The federal referral processed within the week. Identity theft, wire fraud, attempted mortgage fraud. The full set of charges that accumulates when you forge a federal co-borrower signature, and a forensic accountant has documented every layer of it before walking into the room. My stepmother entered a plea agreement several months later. I know the broad outlines because the prosecutor's office is required to keep victims informed. I read the updates the way I read financial reports, carefully without much feeling, extracting only what I needed to know. The Gatlinburg cabin fell through. The HELOC was voided. My father's retirement accounts took a significant hit covering attorney fees, which I learned through my aunt who still sends me texts sometimes, holiday updates, how the weather is where she lives. She means well. My father sent one email, 3 sentences. He was sorry. He didn't know how bad it had gotten. He hoped someday I would understand. I understood perfectly. That was always the problem. I understood exactly what had happened and exactly how much of it he had let happen. From the spreadsheet she'd been keeping since I was 14 to the pen shaking in his hand at that table. Understanding is not the same as forgiving. I did not write back. I printed the email, filed it in a folder marked correspondence, and made myself a cup of coffee. People ask sometimes, usually in comments, sometimes people who knew the situation from the edges, why I didn't warn him before it reached that room, why I didn't give him one more chance to choose differently. The answer is that I had given him the only chance that mattered. Every dinner, Every quiet moment, every time she made a comment about family money, and I looked at him and he looked away. Those were all chances. He had 17 years of them. He chose the rubber plant every time. I live alone now in an apartment in Buckhead with good light and a kitchen I have entirely to myself. My credit score is intact. My savings account has never been accessed by anyone but me. My Sunday morning credit reviews have been, for the past several months, completely uneventful. I paid for this silence with something I won't get back. But the accounts are settled, the documentation is filed, and the only spreadsheet with my name on it is one I made myself, tracking exactly what I own and exactly what I owe, which is nothing to anyone. If you've ever had to protect yourself from someone who was supposed to protect you first, leave a heart below. And if you want to know how the sentencing went, subscribe to Orapedal. I'll be here.